Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the May 13th Board of County Commissioners work session. We have this morning on the agenda exit conference with the State Auditor's Office. And that'll take up the first hour. So is there any introduction from the county manager to what we're doing?
Thank you so much, Vice Chair. Well, good morning, everybody. I want to thank the team for working on this, and of course, we want to welcome the State Auditor's Office. Maybe we could start off with some introductions, and then go from there.
Great. I am Melissa Dixon, and I was the lead auditor for the 2022 audit.
And I'm Lisa Carroll. I'm the audit manager for Team Olympia.
And good morning, my name is Kelly Collins. I'm the Director of Local Audit.
And of course, I'd like to, Auditor Hall, I'd like
Sure.
to pitch over to you to see if you'd like to make any opening comments.
Mary Hall, Thurston County Auditor. I just want to thank you again. You're so nice to work with every single year, and I know this was a little more challenging because it was a difficult transaction with a lot of conflicting information, but we certainly understand your role, and we appreciate our working relationship with you. So I just let you go forward. Do we want to introduce all of the electeds and everybody at the table?
Start.
Sure. Mary Hall, Thurston County Auditor.
Wayne Fournier, Thurston County Commissioner.
Gary Edwards, Thurston County Commissioner.
Emily Klaus, Thurston County Commissioner.
We have one online. You want to introduce yourself, Ty?
Sure, Ty Menser, Thurston County Commissioner for District 3.
Okay.
We have,
And
Yep.
Commissioner Mejia, we are just doing introductions and it's your turn.
Carolina Mejia, Thurston County Commissioner for District 1. Is that good?
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Leonard Hernandez, County Manager. Good morning.
Good morning, I'm Robin Campbell, Assistant County Manager for Internal Services.
Nicole Martinez, Budget and Fiscal Manager.
I'm Diana Benson, Chief Deputy Auditor.
I'm Darren Bennett, the Financial Services Manager in the Auditor's Office.
Jeff Gadman, County Treasurer.
Rob Gilder, Assistant County Manager for the External Programs.
And I'll just mention that we are joined today virtually by many of the finance staff from across the county. With that, I think we're gonna turn it over to you, and Brandy's gonna bring up the PowerPoint, please. Yep.
Does everybody have a copy they need? We're still getting printers going.
All right, well, good morning. Thank you for giving us some of your time. We know your time is precious. We made the introduction, so we'll go ahead and look forward to the next slide of the presentation. So the State Auditor's Office by Washington State Constitution is the independent state auditor of all public accounts, and we take that role very seriously. We definitely feel we have a role in progressing trust in government through our audits. We are independent eyes into the government operations across the state, whether it's local or state. We also provide opportunities for improving transparency, efficiency in operations, and have a lot of resources. So not just through the audit process, but year-round, we are a resource to governments, providing a help desk and assistance throughout the year. And so we encourage you to reach out to us if you have questions. So today we have an accountability audit that we're going to present to you for fiscal year 22. I'm going to hand it off to Lisa Carroll, Audit Manager.
So as Kelly mentioned, we are presenting our exit today on your accountability audit. We're covering the period of January 1st, 2021 through December 31st of 2022. The purpose of an accountability audit is to ascertain whether the county complied with state laws, regulations, contracts, grant agreements, and your own policies and procedures. In addition to these, we also look at whether the county has adequate controls to safeguard public resources. So there is a packet of information that we passed around as well as a virtual packet that we sent. And in there, you'll see a copy of the agenda for this meeting, has a summary of all of the key points we'll be touching on, as well as the draft audit report. And that is the accountability audit report covering the period I just mentioned. So under the heading Results in Brief, you will see that the audit found that most of the areas we examined, the county operations complied in all material respects with applicable state laws, regulations, and its own policies, and provided adequate controls over the safeguarding of public resources. So that is on page 4 of the audit report, draft audit report in that packet. So we looked at many things during this audit. So in selecting areas,
That's the problem.
yes, thank you. So in selecting specific areas for further review, we conducted a number of planning procedures that incorporated reviewing the meeting minutes of the governing body, analyzing trends in financial data, including payroll and vendor information, conducting risk assessments with a number of key staff and members of the governing body, as well as a number of additional planning procedures. So we utilize a risk-based approach to determine what we're going to look at during the audit. And included in the agenda and the report, as well as on your screen, are the areas that we selected for further testing. Thank you. So I do have information and am prepared to speak to every bullet point here, but there are a number of them. And as we've already had a pre-exit with members of the county, we're going to pick a few to highlight for you today, and then we're happy to go into more detail if there are any questions on any of those.
Go ahead and
Thank you. So the first area I wanted to touch on is the assessor's office. So for the assessor's office, we gain an understanding of the processes and internal controls over assessor's office operations, including property valuations, exemptions and deferrals, and personal property assessments. We also verified the accuracy of property tax billings, determined whether the assessor's office appraised all new construction within 12 months of receipt of the building permit, determined whether the assessor's office complied with their reevaluation schedule, and determined whether they met statutory dates and deadlines. So that was a big area for us, doing an entire department for the audit. Another big department audit that we did was of district court. For that area, we looked at cash receipting. We also looked at adjustments there at the district court, as well as trust account activity. Next up, we did quite a number of areas related to procurement. So we had public works and purchases, as well as compliance with public works projects. So one of the big areas we looked at was this building, the atrium project. And we did have some issues that we found with that procurement that we're going to be reporting as an audit finding. Melissa's going to be going over that shortly, so I will skip over the details of that for now. But beyond the atrium project, we also tested competitive bidding, change orders, and compliance for prevailing wages with the long-term involuntary bed expansion project. We also tested the county's procurement of a new permit tracking software, which was a total cost of $5.8 million for a 10-year contract. And we also tested compliance for piggybacking that the county utilized when purchasing 5 paramedic vehicles that came to $1.1 million. The next area I wanted to touch on is the use of restricted funds. So we looked at several areas there. The first one listed there is the real estate excise tax. So that, in conjunction with the next bullet, the interfund loan compliance, is touched on in the finding that we'll be going over shortly. So I will skip over on that. But a few of the other restricted funds we looked at were the Veterans Relief Fund, the opioid settlement funds, which is also known as the Blake decision, and then impact fees. And so for those, we looked at how the county used those restricted funds to make sure that they were used appropriately and in accordance with state law. We also did a lot of work in some of your major accounting systems, so cash receipting, payroll, and accounts payable. So for that, we look at controls, which are the processes and procedures you have in place to safeguard public resources. And then we did a lot of testing in those areas in many different departments. And then I also wanted to touch on accounts receivable. To the next slide now. And for that, we looked at utility billing and adjustments. Again, we look at controls there to determine whether they're adequate to safeguard public resources. We performed testing by recalculating billings at your 4 utility locations, Boston Harbor, Grand Mound, Tamashan, and Olympic View. And then we tested customer adjustments to determine whether they were in compliance with county policies, properly approved, and were adequately supported. So I didn't touch on every single bullet there, but as you can see, we had 2 full slides of areas that we looked at for the county. A lot of work went into this audit, a lot of very positive and clean results that we saw. So beyond the finding that I mentioned, I did want to ask if there's any questions from the county about any of the areas that I just went over, or any areas that I perhaps didn't touch on that you'd like more details.
And you said besides the findings, because that's what we're all interested in.
So we'll talk about that next.
Keep going.
All right, I will pass this over to Melissa.
Sorry, I had a question.
Yes.
Commissioner
If I
Messy?
could. I'm hoping you just misspoke, but you mentioned opioid settlement funds are not the same as Blake funds, and so is that just a misstatement there, or a misunderstanding on your part?
We looked at the Blake decision, so if I misspoke there, then yes. It was the Blake decision that we looked at.
Okay.
That's right, they're not the same.
Great. So throughout the course of the audit, we find issues that we are required to bring to your attention in the form of an audit finding, so that's what we're going to be discussing. So as most of you know, the county relocated several of your administrative offices and departments to the atrium building, which this building is a leased building. This project was funded with real estate excise tax 1 funds, or what we will refer to as REIT 1 funds. And so there's a few different sections of the finding. So we like to go into detail a little bit. So first is procurement with public works projects. So state law requires that counties use formal competitive bidding for all public works projects costing more than $350,000. And then for REIT, state law requires that REIT funds be used exclusively for capital projects that are in your capital facilities plan. So going into details about the description of the condition, so the county entered into a lease agreement with a private building owner for the atrium building. And the county required that the lessor or the owner of the building remodel the building to the county's specifications. And the county paid a total of about $7.5 million to the private building owner for these leasehold improvements. And the county did not require that the private building owner go out to competitively bid this project, which is required by state law, anytime a project is executed at the cost of the local government. So the county also purchased equipment and furniture for the atrium building for a total cost of about $1.8 million. And then the county also approved an amendment to the furniture and equipment purchase for about $242,000. And that amendment was not included in the original scope of the purchase. So we determined that the county should have separately gone out to bid for that contract amendment. And then also for the restricted funds, the county, as I said, funded the atrium building project with the REIT 1 funds. And our audit found that the furniture and equipment portion of the purchase was not allowable use of REIT 1 funds according to the state law's definition of what is allowable use. So we also noted that the REIT 1 fund had a negative cash balance at the end of 2023 of about $327,000. And according to the BAR's manual, anytime there's a negative cash balance in a fund, an interfund loan should be issued so that it's not basically unallowable borrowing from other funds. So we do appreciate the county's due diligence for the steps that you took prior to going through this. We understand that the county believed that they were following applicable laws, regulations. You also based your decisions on the county's interpretation of your own policies and legal advice that you received, based on what you believed was allowable use of REIT 1 funds, and the steps you should have taken for the procurement of the project. So essentially, we're saying that the county should have gone out to competitively bid this project, or required that the building owner competitively bid this project, and that the county should not have used those funds for the purchase of furniture and equipment. So we are recommending that the county establish controls and procedures to ensure compliance with state law when procuring public works projects and goods with public funds. We're also recommending that the county repay the $1.8 million to the REIT 1 fund that was used to purchase the furniture and equipment, and that the county establish additional plans and processes to ensure that funds do not have a negative cash balance in the future, specifically taking the necessary steps to rebuild the REIT 1 fund to a positive cash balance. That, yes.
Are you taking questions now?
Were we gonna take questions or hold until the end?
Sure, let's take questions.
Sure.
So why isn't, when you take tax dollars and you go out and make $7 million worth of purchases and you don't bid, and so that's ripe for corruption. So how do we know that the taxpayers got a good deal here? That when product was bought, whatever it was, that it wasn't inflated substantially and somebody gets a kickback? How do we know that doesn't happen if we don't follow the rules?
Don't know that it doesn't happen, right?
So, yeah, so we're just, we audit to the state law, and so we look to see that the transactions that the county processed are in compliance with the state law. So I'm not sure with regard to your comments, sir, how that applies to what we just presented, but if you could.
Okay, I guess I'll follow up with, is there a way that public money was spent that we know that we got a good deal? Or is there a way to see that we did not get a good deal and somebody got their palms greased? Do you follow the money on for, after we send it to whomever we send it to? I'm not in a position of pointing fingers. I just think the public got a bad deal here. And I don't know how we rectify it exactly. And is there any responsibility on the county when they turn money over to a third party and say, here you go,
So,
do
yeah.
this project?
So
Did
we-
they charge too much? And should we be getting some of that money back?
Yeah, so we have the responsibility to audit the county, and so the county has to follow compliance with state law with regard to competitive bidding process. And that process should ensure that you're paying the lowest bidder, ideally, for the use of public funds for a project that's applicable. So the handoff of that funds to, whether it's a nonprofit or a private citizen, if that's what you're asking, that's just the market of whatever they're going to bill you. So we don't follow through after the government's process of
So
that.
the Attorney General doesn't get involved at all to find out what happened to this money? How was it spent? What did we get for that? And be able to maybe recover if there was some real inappropriate action.
Well, the county did have a process in place where, prior to making payment to the building owner, they did require, correct me if I'm wrong, that the building owner submit reimbursement requests with itemized receipts of what the county was reimbursing them for, and I believe they were reviewed by the county to ensure that they were reasonable and within the scope of the project. And so there was a process in place where all the itemized receipts were reviewed and approved at the county level for reasonableness and to make sure that there wasn't anything unallowable being charged in there. Is that right? Yes. Okay.
And I think your audit finding is more about the process and stating that county should have bid that process. It wasn't that the process was necessarily, if there was something inappropriate in the transactions, you just said there was a process by which reimbursement. You're just saying, hey, that, from your perspective, that should have been bid.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, we didn't identify any misappropriation or inappropriate expenditures. This was more the funding that was used and that the process didn't follow compliance with regard to competitive bidding.
Is there, if we overpaid, is there any recourse that we have that, would it be a civil issue maybe, that we would go after the person that
I
spent
think
more
that's
than they should?
way outside their purview.
Yeah, that's not anything we
They
identified.
safeguard our process. And that's it. And then you make recommendations for us to fix our process.
So that's up to us to
Yeah,
internally
and that's the
decide.
point of a competitive bid
Okay.
process, is that you get all the bid and you assess that, and we're saying that you have that, it's just that there was an element of it that wasn't followed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
So maybe just a clarification, if I might. I believe one of the issues was the structure of the lease, that because we did a direct reimbursement, we paid the contractor up front. And the intent of that was to save taxpayer dollars. So that was in the reason why the county decided to pay for them up front. If we had structured the lease differently and they had wrapped it into the lease agreement, then bidding is not required. So ultimately, the county determined that it was not negatively affecting taxpayers. And by law, if we had paid over time instead of upfront, there is no bidding requirement. Isn't that correct? On private property. So.
I don't
So that was some of the research that was upfront. It was not just state law. They looked at the MRSC and the MRSC's research with the state auditor's office, lease agreements from other state entities and how they're structuring, and that they had been using direct reimbursement. So it was every intention of the county to absolutely follow law. And it was the structure of the lease was apparently the challenge. Is that correct?
What I understand.
That's our
Well, I
understanding.
suppose we'll have differing opinions about that. I asked for years that we get an attorney general's opinion as to whether we were legal or not, even to come down here.
It says in here that that was done.
No, that was not done.
Yes,
We had
actually,
an opinion from our own prosecutor. We never went to the attorney general and
It
asked.
says right here, Attorney
Prosecutor's
General's Office representing.
consulted with the Attorney General.
Yes.
Yeah, well, we never got anything in writing except from our own attorney, so.
Unfortunately, that is true.
That's outside the scope of this audit and the finding that we're discussing.
Well,
so.
it just kind of goes to show we're not following rules in a lot of different areas. That's my concern. I'm working for the taxpayers that are paying the bills here. And it bugs me.
Commissioner Menzer?
Thank you. I'm not sure what we're taking questions on because they said when they finish. So I have a concern about the report itself, and the structure of it. And if this isn't the right time for that, I can wait till the end. Or if it is, I'll jump in.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know how many times when you have findings, it's based on an entity that willfully, does something contrary to what the rules are, or negligently does something in contrary to rules are, and a result happens that, everyone can agree wasn't in line with the rules, versus a situation where I think this is where there was lack of clarity or disagreement about what the rules required us to do. So I don't know how you handle those different situations, but when you talked at the beginning on your first slide about the whole point of this process is trust in government, increasing transparency, improving efficiency in government, I wrote those down because I don't think the structure of this report enhances any of those. And the reason is because we're in that latter category of a real cloudy part of the law, and we did follow the advice of our attorneys, and I don't think that our prosecutor's office is any less capable than Attorney General's office of interpreting state law. you know, your report doesn't address the authority that we relied on. So, you know, in this case, I don't think it's serving the public or us as an entity trying to do better and establish controls in the future, or the public trying to evaluate transparency of their jurisdictions and what the, you know, what the intent was and how far off were we. There's no addressing of the authority and why we were improper or misguided to have relied on the authority that we lay out in our response. And we actually had a lot more, and we were advised to pull some of it back. But there's even more than what's in the report. But even what's in the report is not addressed by your findings. So as a member of the public, I don't see how I could evaluate what Thurston County did. How was it willful? Was it in good faith? You said here today in this thing that you believe is in good faith, but you know, just understanding how this was a very difficult question of law that our own attorneys when we as the board asked them for legal guidance, and apparently they didn't get it right. But anyway, all of that I think is really germane to what your report is supposed to do in this entire process vis-a-vis the public and the 3 goals that you lay out for what your audit process is based on. So that's just a critique of mine as to this report. We've gone back and forth on the substance of the legal provisions in the meetings, and I frankly don't necessarily agree with the findings. I think that our lawyers have made a stronger case than what your lawyers have put forward as the contrary authority, but that's not really for today's debate. I just want to say that I think the public would be better served by a more comprehensive report that outlines and addresses the authority that the county relied on and put forth in its response.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for bringing up your questions and your comments. We do appreciate the feedback, and we like to listen to our auditees and hear what they have to say. We did include the county's response in its entirety in the finding that's in the report that does do a good job of explaining what the county did and the processes that it took to work on this project and do what it felt was in accordance with state law. Our attorney is the Attorney General's office, and we go to them for legal complexities, and the determinations that we received from them are in alignment with the finding that we wrote. So that is what is included in the report, and that's why we offer the county the opportunity to provide the response that is able to add some context and some clarity as to what the county felt that or what the county did and what the processes that it went through. We did acknowledge in our auditor's remarks that we understand the complexity of the project and appreciate the steps the county took to manage the project as you've described in your response. So we did try to give some credit where that was. So I do thank Commissioner Menzer for his comments, but we do stand by our audit findings, and we understand this was a complex one, and we're probably not going to get to a place where we can all agree.
You know, it's unfortunate that I don't know who we is. I was never in on any of the exit interviews because it becomes a public meeting, I guess, and then that creates other controversy. But for us to have this review at this point in time, and this is all brand new information, I think we ought to have an exit interview a week later or something. I mean, so that we as the policy folks get an opportunity to review it and then really come to a list of more pertinent questions, you might say, and maybe solutions. That's my concern anyway. I don't know how you folks.
This isn't like a hearing. Right? These are just they just share their findings, and then we go back amongst ourselves and like, well, do we accept them? Do we fight them? Do we come up with some nuanced response to explain ourselves? But like, it's not. You're not.
As part of the audit process, we go through a vetting with management representation, and so we've gone through several meetings already vetting the audit results, and now, so this is the final version of the audit, and so we'll issue this report within about a week's time. Again, we're a reporting agency, and so, again, it is back then to the county to assess the recommendations and I guess make decisions of how you would respond. We'll be back, we audit the county annually, so we'll be back to do another audit, and we'll follow up on any changes potentially the county did to adjust for our recommendations.
Do we as a county have to pay back these inappropriate expenditures?
That's one of our recommendations, is that it's a restricted, REIT one is restricted funds, and based on our attorney guidance, again, the AG's office review the transactions, we feel that they're not appropriate use, and so that's why one of the recommendations is to have a repayment to the fund.
Just for the equipment
Yeah.
piece.
Not the whole bill, just,
Exactly.
but it's all, these are recommendations that we have to take in and evaluate and determine what our response is and.
And we're available for follow-up after this meeting if somebody has more questions.
So if I had additional questions, could I
Yep.
contact?
Absolutely, we're available
Okay.
year-round. So
And
this
all
is-
of our contact information is in the packet.
Thank you.
So please reach out.
That's what I was just going to point out, is we have a really good working relationship with the state auditor's office. One point of clarification, in their report, it has the cause of condition, that the county officials did feel like they were following the state law. The county had done due diligence, and based on the county's interpretation of our own policies. And a lot of times, Darren will put in a help desk question asking the state auditor, and they're very consistent in the, are you following law, and are you following your policies, and are you seeking legal advice? And this is a complex topic, and if there was some additional information, they are always welcome to, or we're always welcome to contact them, and they'll answer that accordingly.
This does provide an opportunity, though, to look at how we make those decisions and deal with complex problems. And the one thing that I would ask, our office was never involved in how this deal was structured until after the fact. And I think we would have provided additional guidance had we been involved in the process, because we view things through a different lens. It's not dissimilar to how the state auditor looks at things. So I don't view this, I mean, this is unfortunate. We were 6 years where we had no audit findings at all. I think because financial services and the auditor's office was very involved in these types of transactions and decisions. This was much larger in scope than the county has ever dealt with, at least since I've been county auditor, which is now over 10 years. So, I think that the county looked at statute and did the best job they could based on the information and many sources, looking at our, attorney opinions, MRSC. But of course, we didn't get it perfect. And, we're gonna be paying back one fund. It's just like transferring money from one fund to another. And fortunately, when we closed the books, there was an additional $4 million the county was not expecting. So, hopefully it's not going to be too painful, and we'll come out of this with a different perspective on how we move forward on complex transactions. So,
What if the county says, we agree to disagree? We respect your recommendations, but we have different legal opinions.
We would assess that during the next audit.
so we could likely get an audit finding in the next audit as well.
And then,
keep in
and the
mind
next
that
audit finding, what if we go, well, we agree to disagree?
then likely our bond rating would go down, and it would cost more to borrow money. So that's why these audits are important, that the state auditor and the bond council see us as good stewards of public funds.
Well,
That's also a possibility, is what I'm saying. It's like, well,
Absolutely.
we evaluated it, and we still stand by our legal opinion. And then you guys say, okay, thank you, see you next 2 years, right?
So we'll assess it next year, when we come back for the next audit and evaluate what, I guess what changes, and so that's county's taken, so.
And some of the recommendations are, we recommend that you change your process for the next time you do this. So that's a little bit different than.
And then that's a different issue, is if
Do
we
that again.
clean up processes
Yeah.
and build better processes based on your recommendations and, and we're,
It's an ongoing.
yeah.
I'd
Mr.
like to
Vice Chair?
add though that
Ty.
this process was not the norm for the county. We evaluate procurement all the time for the county. And as far as I am aware, there have not been significant issues in the past. And like, this was a huge audit, and we looked at several different county departments and different control processes. And for the most part, aside, I know the finding looks bad, but we looked at 22 different areas. And so a finding over this, in the scope of the whole audit, there was a lot of good processes that the county has. So I don't want to take away from the fact that, for the most part, the county is a good steward of public funds.
Well, and over a 2-year period, I mean,
Yeah.
you went very deep,
Good point.
very broad, but then also 2 years is a broad period of time.
Yeah.
So to your point, the context is 2 years, lots of areas that were audited, and in this specific situation, it's very complex. This is not the run-of-the-mill,
Yes.
highly complex situation that then required multiple legal analysis, both from the county and then even on your side. This wasn't an open book. You see a line, make a decision. It's black and white, lots of conversations. And to our auditor's point, the county has had such a great track record, and then we get into this very complex deal with lots of nuances that then create a situation where now you have some recommendations on how we could do things a little bit different going forward.
Commissioner Menzer, you have a question?
Well, I just want to make a comment. What Mary was talking about ties back to my earlier comment. If you don't provide convincing legal authority as to, if the goal here is that we would be able to reach a better conclusion in the future, and I think that is part of the goal that was just stated, but you don't provide a convincing legal argument as to why the legal trail that we followed wasn't the right trail, then I don't think you're accomplishing that goal. So that's what's been frustrating for me here, and the report's even scantier than the conversations we had. I wasn't convinced in the internal conversations we had, and I don't think anyone could read this report and say, well, gee, the county really screwed up there. So I just think we're missing something in this process to try to make sure that the goal is to make sure we don't end up in this situation in the future. But I don't feel like we're there based on what we have in front of us.
Yeah, I'll add one comment to that, and then I do think we wanted to try to get to the rest of our slides here. One of the things that we did during the audit process was provide the opportunity for your prosecuting attorneys to talk to our representative from the Attorney General's office. We understand this is a very complex transaction with a lot of legal nuance, and that was one way that we felt like we were providing some additional support and guidance by having the attorneys talk, speak the language that they both understand. None of us are lawyers here, so some of these are a little bit above our head, so we rely on the attorneys to do some of that. So that was one way that we did try to provide some of that additional insight and guidance, was to have the attorneys talk directly to each other.
But there was disagreement on that front end as well. And I mean, even when the attorney spoke, they said that there was some gray area from your end, right? Where they kind of basically said it was at the, auditor's discretion, which direction. So, I'm kind of in agreement with Commissioner Menzer here on there is a lot of gray in all of these findings and us following our attorney's recommendation.
I have to say, though, it's pretty plain for a layman, I guess, to review the procurement policies that are required and the RCWs. And we even had citizen activists that came in and said, what are you doing? And yet they end up right, the citizen activist ends up right, and we end up wrong. That just bothers me to no end, that we just continued marching down, and it'd be different if it was, $100,000 or something, but we're talking about a lot of money here that the taxpayers are looking at as inappropriately spent. And I don't know what the answer is, but it sure is frustrating that we're trying to kind of make nice out of this whole thing. And I hope in the end, we get it figured out for that trust with the community, because they're the ones that are paying the bill here. So I don't know where it's going for sure, but this is serious stuff. I'm just gonna shut up. I'll put my foot in my mouth if I keep going here, I can tell.
Well, we want to thank you all for the contribution to the discussion. We're happy to take other questions later on, but at this time, I think we'll move forward with our presentation. Thank you.
Great. So before we wrap it up, I just wanted to take a minute to thank county officials and staff. I know this was a long audit this time, so thank you all for your timely communication throughout the audit process, specifically Darren and the auditor's office. You guys are always great to work with. You dedicate a lot of extra time in addition to your normal duties, and so thank you so much for just working with us and persevering throughout the course of the audit.
I used to sit where you sit, Melissa, so I understand what to go through every year.
Thank you.
I just want to reiterate what's been said. You guys are always so good to work with. And this issue, in our prior discussions, I mean, it's been back and forth, and it's a complex issue, and you guys have been very, very respectful of us and our opinions, and we do appreciate what you do for the citizens of the state.
Thank you. So I have a few more closing remarks to go through. We wanted to mention that audit costs are slightly lower than our estimated cost that we provided at the beginning of the audit, so a little bit of news on that front. We are actually already underway on the county's next audit. So May 2024, here we are. So we are starting on a one-year audit of your financial, which includes your ACFR audit. We're also doing the single audit program, and then probably later this year we'll do a one-year accountability audit as well. We've included an estimated cost for all of those in the exit packet for your budgeting purposes. And as Kelly mentioned, this report is expected to publish to our website in about a week or a little more. If you've not already signed up to receive notifications from our office about when reports publish or other news and alerts that we periodically share, we do encourage you to sign up. The web address to do so is on the PowerPoint as well as in the packet. And then we will also send out a customer service survey when the report is released. Darren, that notification will come to you, but anyone is welcome to fill those out. We appreciate hearing what we can do to improve on our services, but if you have things that went well in the audit that you'd like to share, that's also really great for us to hear. That wraps up everything that we wanted to go over today. I want to thank you all again for your time and for your attention to this meeting and throughout the audit process. As I said, we're already back at it again, so not rid of us for long, but thank you all again for your time.
When you say back at it again, looking at the county's activities.
Yes, we're already started on the 2023 audit.
They've been hanging out in our conference room upstairs.
We have a couple extra meetings.
Are there any other questions from the county that we can answer at this time?
No, thank you, though. Thanks.
Thank you for your
Questions online? All right.
Great. All right, thank you.
Gary, didn't we have something else going on? All right, we will adjourn for approximately 15 minutes. Return at 10 o'clock for the board work session.